But I was reading through the policy, and I noticed, there were certain things where it's like, that were essentially trying to deal with some of the issues with unemployment, some of the issues with homelessness, issues with incarceration, all of that. And what I've observed, now correct me if I'm wrong, I do not pretend to be an expert, in the male issues or the manosphere, none of that. But what I have heard from or observed from different content creators I've spoken with who are in the manosphere or closely associated with it, is like, there's very much this, pull yourself up by the bootstraps mentality and just figure it out and make the best of the system. But with that, I also feel like I've heard somewhat of I don't want to say a disregard, but not necessarily a willingness to want to engage in different programs or governmental support, because then that would be seen as, in some ways, feeding into bad behavior or feeding into, laziness. I don't know how else to put it. I mean, I've heard this especially with men, complaining about welfare, things of that nature. But even when it comes to men who face homelessness or men who face poverty, from what I've observed, it's very much just like, well, man up and figure it out. So when I was looking through some of the different policies, I was thinking, I wonder if there are men out here who would look at this and say, this is coddling. Men who fall on this, it's essentially their fault. They need to pull themselves up by the bootstraps, be a man, and figure it out like the rest of us.
Oh yeah, there are definitely people, black men and black women, that would feel that way. The irony to that is every group that we compare ourselves to, ends up having government support when you look at them historically. Nobody doesn't, and especially nobody that's doing well. And if they don't have direct federal or state support, they have international support. So we have this strange habit of comparing ourselves to groups that actually have the very support we don't think that we need. And yet we're one of the poorest demographics out here in terms of the black community, right? With no inherited wealth. So it's one of those kind of things where it's counterintuitive, and we're kind of working with standards that are really superhuman in some respects.
Yeah.
And it doesn't leave us very much room to breathe because it's not realistic. But on the other end of the spectrum, yeah, you're definitely right. There are those that would say, you don't need government and so on and so forth. But here's the thing. The issue with that is that the distrust that black men have of being able to rely on any kind of institution is not come to in isolation. It's not something that black men just woke up and decided arbitrarily. Part of it comes out of the fact that we've never really had that type of support. I mean, even when we're talking about leading up to the development of affirmative action, where black men were on the docket to get support, we were quickly switched out for white women. And in that new hierarchy, where usually the hierarchy was white men, you know what I mean? And then it kind of went down from there. It flipped after the affirmative action kind of narrative, and it became white women, then black women, and then maybe some black men would benefit from some type of affirmative action. So we've never enjoyed any type of structural support. We're not used to it. If anything, we've been vilified. And here's the other thing. When black men are trying to date and or marry women, most particularly black women, each individual man has to pretty much compete with the United States government in terms of being able to provide a woman with security. That's what you have to do. You have to compete essentially with the United States government. Some men can do it. If you make over six figures, you represent more than like a little around 4% of the black community if you're over six figures. And yet that's a number we throw around a lot, But if you don't make that, she can replace you. And if she doesn't like what the lifestyle that you're trying to provide, she can take you to court. She can leave you and either find somebody else or rely on government. So we come to these kinds of perspectives about institutions out of a history of never having been supported by them in any substantive way. So there's an inbred kind of distrust. And this is one of the tensions with black women. Black women come at government support with a very different attitude because it's a very entitled sense. They're used to it. When you're used to a safety net and you're dealing with someone that isn't. And I can't tell you even on a personal level how many relationships I've had with women who go into ventures with a sense that they can fail because there's something that will prevent them from hitting rock bottom. Whereas for me, I know there isn't. You know what I mean? And this has led to a lot of different tensions about, things that you wouldn't think have any realistic basis, like where we're going to travel to or what business ventures we'll get in or which projects we should apply for. You'd be surprised how many subtleties are there as far as her sense that all will be well, because if it doesn't work out for her, somebody will save her, be it an institution or a person or me. Whereas for me, nobody's coming for me. You know, nobody's coming. I'm not expecting anybody, and more than likely, nobody is. So that produces a whole different worldview. And so when you say to black men, look, you know, we should be talking about institutional support. We should be talking about X. Yeah, if part of it, you're going to get the traditional masculine narrative we get in the West, which is the rugged individualist. But a part of it is unique to black men in that we've never had it. We've never been able to rely on it. And hell, if you did try to get government support on anything, yeah, you were labeled, you know, lazy. You were labeled, you know, all these things. And these would be by the institutions themselves. You know what I mean? So it definitely has a history. It doesn't come out of nowhere, and it's something you have to remember when you're engaging black men. They don't have a support network, never have.
Okay, so with that, then it would make sense as to why, as I mentioned earlier, a natural response to something that you presented might be opposition, because it kind of goes against how many have been trained and what many have experienced. And so they're kind of used to not having support. So to operate with support seems a bit foreign.
I mean, hell, even requests for reparations are seen that way by some. Where it's like, why are you asking for that? We're never going to get it. You know, forget it. You know, just go do it on your own. Make yourself a millionaire. I mean, these kinds of narratives. It comes out of being excluded from society, and this is essentially what black men are grappling with. We've been excluded, you know, institutionally, politically, and socially, even within families, for so long that many of us don't really know another reality. So it's difficult to have a conversation about how we can be included when it's not something you've experienced. And I'm trying to help initiate that conversation, but I haven't been included either. I mean, I've been a black sheep my whole life. You know, it is what it is. You know what I mean? It's, you know, I'm not trying to paint a picture of victimization. I'm just simply saying black men are not used to being included.